Rabbi Stephen Grundfast, the Emeritus Rabbi at Bethel Congregation in Akron. I started there in 2004, and I retired 6 years ago. It'll be 6 years this coming summer. And I have to tell you, I've done a lot of Zoom meetings. I hold Zoom meetings myself on my own computer. I have a Talmud class I teach every Tuesday morning. I get 3 or 4 people around the country that join me, but I've never put something together like this. And I want to thank Rabbi Foster for taking all the material I had and putting it together like this. So without further ado, to me, the Haggadah is one of the most special books that the Jews have. Even though we use it just once or twice a year, I've always been enthralled with it. I've collected them over the years. I've bought even a few since I've been retired. And I have, I think, 100 or 150 all over the house, some in my daughter's house that she has as well, plus a bunch of Haggadahs that we use for our Seder. We're going to look at some Haggadah covers. Unfortunately, you can't be here. I have them all in the back that you'll be able to see. Maybe next week you'll come in person, and I'm bringing some really interesting ones for next week, very special ones, at least to me. But if you want to look more about Haggadahs, especially the illuminated Haggadahs, I direct you to the Jewish Theological Seminary Library, to the special collection. You go online, jts.edu, and you'll find the world's treasures there. And I'm going to show you some of them that I have pictures of as well. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. This is my wife's special Haggadah. As soon as she saw it at the Educator store, she loved the shape of it. And it does open as a Hebrew book on the other side. And it's got the full text. And we don't use this one at the Seder. We don't want to get it dirty or filled with wine. By the way, if anybody has a question or a comment, you can certainly stop me. If you have a special Haggadah that you own, I'm sure you can put it up in front of your computer and show us as well. Okay, next slide. Oh, you know what? I can't read the whole. Yeah, I have it over here. Okay. Up on the screen, it says, to the editor, Rabbi, the Nobel laureate in physics, was once asked, why did you become a scientist rather than a doctor or lawyer or businessman like other immigrant kids in your neighborhood? This is years ago. My mother made me a scientist without ever intending it. Every Jewish mother in Brooklyn would ask her child after school, did you learn anything today? But not my mother. She always asked me a different question. Izzy, she would say, did you ask a good question today? That difference, asking good questions, made me become a scientist. That's what the Haggadah is all about. Next slide, please. That's the Haggadah. It's a bunch of questions. Now, you're not going to see this very well. Can you see this on your screens?
Yeah, I can also read things if you want.
I've got it here. I'll read it.
Small print, but I can see it.
Okay. I gave this to you, and if you want copies, I can certainly send it to you. For years, I did a second Seder at our synagogue in Akron, and I would have people read things. So here's the 2 minutes Haggadah, a Passover service for the impatient. I'm going to read it. You follow along. Opening prayers. Thanks, God, for creating wine. Drink wine. Thanks for creating produce. Eat parsley, if you like parsley. Overview. Once we were slaves in Egypt, now we're free. That's why we're doing this. 4 questions. What's up with the matzah? What's the deal with the horseradish? What's with the dipping of the herbs? What's this whole slouching at the table business? Answers. When we left Egypt, we were in a hurry. There was no time to make decent bread. Life was bitter, like horseradish. It's called symbolism. Free people get to slouch. A funny story. Once these 5 rabbis talked all night, then it was morning. Heat soup up. The 4 kinds of children and how to deal with them. This is the 2-minute Seder we're reading.
Sure.
Wise child, explain Passover. Simple child, explain Passover slowly. Silent child, explain Passover loudly. Wicked child, browbeat in front of the relatives. Speaking of children, we hid some matzah. Whoever finds it gets $5. The story of Passover. It's a long time ago. We're slaves in Egypt. Pharaoh is a nightmare. We cry out for help. God brings plagues upon the Egyptians. We escape, bake some matzah. God parts the Red Sea. We make it through. The Egyptians aren't so lucky. We wander 40 years in the desert, eat manna, get the Torah, wind up in Israel, get a new temple, enjoy several years without being persecuted again. Let brisket cool now. The 10 plagues, blood, frogs, lice, you name it. The singing of Dayenu. If God had gotten us out of Egypt and not punished our enemies, it would have been enough. If he'd punished our enemies and not parted the Red Sea, it would have been enough. And he parted the Red Sea, remove gefilte fish from refrigerator now. Eat matzah, drink more wine. Thanks again, God, for everything. Serve meal. That's something that I would use every year. My kids would say, why can't we just do that every year and get right to the dinner? Okay, next slide, please. In the next few slides, I'm just going to show you some Haggadahs from my collection, and they're really wide-ranging. It's amazing to me how many people and organizations have produced Haggadahs. Yeah. There may be over 3,000 to 4,000 different Haggadahs. I don't have that many. Every year you can buy maybe more than one, maybe 5 or 10. This is the El Al Haggadah from the Israeli Airlines. Okay, next. This one is actually very interesting. It has a story. This is a Russian Haggadah in Russian. Yeah. And this one, can you go to the next slide? Oh, no, go back. This book was produced by the conservative movement, the Masorti in Israel. And they made it of use when all the Russian Jews went to Israel back in the 80s and 90s. And when I was in Houston, I was the associate rabbi of a large congregation, and we would have a second night Seder. It was loaded. We had 600-700 people at the Seder. And the year that a lot of the Russian immigrants came to Houston, every community welcomed in, we had a couple of tables with them, and I ordered these special for them that night. And I distributed them, and I said, isn't it great that we have Haggadahs for you? They all said this is the first time they've ever seen a Haggadah. Sure. It brought tears to my eyes, and I have a couple of them as a memory, and they enjoyed the Seder. And just as an aside, we used music in our synagogue at that time, and there was a violinist. He had just come over, and he played Kol Nidre for us, which was really wonderful. All right, next slide.
Okay, yeah, there's other pages from within this that are later on.
The what? Yeah, it is. We have more of that.
Yeah.
It was actually my mistake. I will say, this is the first time I'm actually doing a slide presentation. Rabbi Foster put this thing together. So I sent him the slides and he put it together. Egalitarian Haggadah. Aviva Cantor is actually a pretty well-known person. And see at the top, Lilith, special edition. You know who Lilith was? Anybody know?
Maybe Adam's first wife. Yes.
She was like a demon, and he got rid of her. And so Lilith's become associated with women's libs, so to speak. Okay, next Haggadah. All right, this one is from the National Jewish Welfare Board, given out to people in the armed services. This is pretty old. I think this may be from World War II. And is there a date on it? Designed for the seal of the United States. Yeah, I have it here. So that's kind of neat. I don't remember where I got that from. Yeah, I've been a rabbi 40 years, so I've been in several congregations. So who knows where these things come from? All right, next.
Yeah, I want to point out if I can, and also if anyone wants to share anything, but it's interesting here that it says inspired by the Passover story is originally proposed by Franklin, John Adams, and Jefferson. So this Haggadah, the inspiration for the idea for a U.S. Armed Forces Haggadah goes back to the founding of the country.
Read that. So this Haggadah has a special meaning to me. We lived in Savannah, Georgia for 4 years during Desert Storm in 90, I guess it was 90 or 91. And I knew a chaplain that went over in August of that year and served his troops. And he sent me letters back. And I treasure those letters. He was in Saudi Arabia. And I remember him telling me whenever he would leave the base, he took off his, you know what the Jewish chaplain's insignia is? Anybody know that?
What'd you say?
It's the insignia. The Christians have a cross and the Jews wear
The insignia is the two tablets, I think.
commandments. And he was told to take them off. And he wrote me a letter and said, he's probably the first rabbi in Saudi Arabia since Moses. So which is kind of nice.
So this says that it was 1952.
Okay.
Right?
So it's after the war.
Reprinted 1967.
Right. So unfortunately, Rabbi Romer passed away a few years ago. He was real army and he would go out with the troops in the desert and et cetera. And he was a wonderful guy. And I treasure those letters that he sent me. So this really book is very special to me. Okay, next, please. Graphic novel. This is really interesting. Jordan Garfinkel lives in Beechwood, right here in town. He has worked for who makes the Superman comics?
DC Comics.
He was on their staff, and he's now working on a Tanakh graphic novel. Every book of the Tanakh. And I bought this for myself, and I bought 2 copies for my 2 grandsons, who are now 14 and 12. And I was with my grandson tonight. His bar mitzvah is next year on my anniversary, 60th anniversary of my bar mitzvah. And I'm teaching him his Haftorah. And he saw this Haggadah. He said, oh yeah, I'm going to use that this year. I said, good, very, very special. It's really great. I wish, I have some of the pictures here. This is I don't know if you can read it. It's pretty, is it bigger on your screens? Can you see some of it?
Yeah, they can see it. It's small, but
Small, but we can, the letters are small, but we can read, they're readable.
So he did, I don't know if he did the text as well as the drawings. He's a very, very talented guy. And
Very nice. And he's also very nice.
oh, see, good, yes.
Oh.
He mentored my son as well. Okay, so this is the Seder plate. Next is the Manish Tanah. And you can see, look at the different kinds of people. He was very, very PC in this graphic novel. But they're Jews of all shapes and sizes. This is one of my favorite ones. So what's interesting, the text follows the Haggadah eventually. It has a full Haggadah with all these pictures and things that he drew. I'm looking forward to his graphic novel, Tanakh. I can't imagine what that's like. So I like this one. This is the hail.
Yes.
And the, was that boiled? Yeah. So that's kind of neat. Now we all know about, okay, go to the next one. We all know about the Maxwell House Haggadah, right? Stay on that for a second. I got to find this. There it is. You won't be able to see, but I have to read it to you. This is the one that we see at the supermarket. When I was much younger.
No, they have new covers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to buy something to get them. I was at Giant Eagle down in Akron and they had a bunch of them and I was going to take one. Then it said you have to buy a certain amount of either coffee or something. But when I remember as a kid growing up in New Jersey, have them at the end of the checkout counter.
Really?
And you should take as many as you want. And I don't know where I got this one. But the next one, this one's from 30 something or 40 something. I have 2 copies of this. And I want to read to you a brief, if you go to the next slide. Yeah, if you can, the people are partially cutting it out.
yeah, I can read it if you want.
No, I've got it. I got it right here. So the Maxwell House Haggadah is the most goyish part of Passover. A brief history of the most popular and tacky Passover Haggadah by author Abigail Weil. who writes about food, literature, and pop culture. So she says, keep the tradition, cherish the moment, share the holiday, said no Jew ever. And yet this saccharine statement has a prominent position on the Seder table of more than 50 million American Jews in the end paper of the Maxwell House Haggadah. It says that. She says, I come from a big boisterous family in the Cleveland suburbs, and we throw a hell of a Seder. For decades, my late Uncle Willie, a prominent local doctor, anybody know a guy named Willie as a doctor? Reclined.
Yeah, it could, ask Laura Siegel. That could have been her grandfather,
Okay. And he reclined at the
our development director.
as he led the service for our family. One year I gifted him a beautiful hardcover Haggadah, a souvenir from Israel. He gave it pride of place on the credenza, but for the Seder, we still defaulted to the Maxwell House Haggadah, MHH. We had dozens of copies that, though stained and ragged, allowed everyone to participate. And when you're a big boisterous family, everyone always participates. In this sense, Jewishness defines itself against Goyishness as an atheistic value, a measure of taste. The synonym for Goyish isn't Christian, it's tacky. And nothing embodies the Goyishness of Passover more than this Maxwell House Haggadah. I'm not going to read the rest of it. If anybody wants a copy, it is something. Now, growing up in my house back in the 50s, my grandfather had a Haggadah, which I have today. It may have been printed in Europe, and everybody had different Haggadahs.
That's right.
And we went around the room doing the English. My grandfather was just chuckling and going through the Haggadah itself. It was a lot of fun. All right, next slide.
The reason they used the Maxwell House and before that the Carmel was because it was cheap, it was free.
It's free.
You have everybody can have the same copy.
Right, that's right. Yes,
So what you're
That's
saying
all.
is,
I have a question here.
in
Yes.
your family's tradition, simultaneously, your grandfather, who was quote unquote the leader, was saying it all in Hebrew and everyone else was reading other things.
Yes,
and
and
they
singing
had
the songs.
same time.
And I always sat next to my grandfather.
Oh,
Maybe that's why I'm here today. And I have that Haggadah with a lot of still matzah in it and a lot of wine stains in that Haggadah. And it's sort of falling apart. I probably should get it rebound, but it really is, it's extremely special. And I hope they'll pass it down to the rest of the family. And I'm sure some of you must have things like that, very special. My grandmother gave my wife a lot of her things that she cooked with, etc.
oh,
This is an interesting one. A Haggadah Yehudi Sin. Sin is the word for Chinese. The Haggadah of the Chinese Jews. Now you see at the bottom, now go back to says, from a manuscript of the 17th, 18th century CE, originating in the Jewish colony of Kaifeng, with an introduction by Professor Sita Roth, who was one of the great historians of the 20th century. What's interesting about Kaifeng, that had a large Jewish population. Many people escaped Europe, made their way to China. And I have a friend who's the head of the Sino-Judea Institute. And he goes to Kaifeng often.
what part of China is that?
I don't know where it is. He
I can
does.
share a little about it in a minute.
Go ahead. Yeah, do you know? Go ahead.
A little. I mean, most historians believe, while there were many Jews in the 1700s, 1800s that came over to China, particularly from Iraq, and then there was a later influx of refugees during World War II. The earliest Chinese Jews can be traced about 1,000 years ago. A group of traders from the Middle East that traveled on the established trade routes, the Silk Route, all the way to Kaifeng, which is in northern China. It's kind of, if I recall, I'll pull it up on a map. Yeah, it's north of Beijing. I don't know how well you know China, or sorry, it's a little south of Beijing, but it's kind of towards the sea, in close to where Beijing is, if you know where China is, kind of in the far east of China. And Kaifeng is believed to have been an established Jewish community already 1,000 years ago. In fact, there was a synagogue, unfortunately doesn't still exist today, but a synagogue that was built, and you would think that it was a Chinese temple because they used the architecture around them.
Right, that's true. Now, rabbi that I know is in retirement in Savannah, Georgia, and I invited him to Bethel one year to do a evening of the Chinese Jews, and the person in the kitchen cooked a Chinese meal for
Oh,
us.
wonderful.
So it was really, really great. Now
This-
turn to the next slide.
She
This
has a
community, though, they actually were practicing patrilineal descent for a long time, the original community. And so that's kind of responsible for the assimilation. They were discovered by the West
Huh.
when a priest came out.
Catholic
and-
priest.
A Catholic priest, and they were trying to sell him their Torah scroll or some part of it because they recognized there was some sort of common common history there. And for a while, they were trying to convince this priest to come and be the rabbi of their community because he knew more, because at that point, the community had had assimilated and there were people there who were still practicing some Jewish traditions, but you know, there wasn't anyone there that was learned. So they were
Yeah.
trying to get this priest
Wonderful,
to be
good.
their rabbi.
Right. It's true that by the late 1800s, the community had sadly largely assimilated. Although many people today are retracing and finding their roots because there were the same, 6 surnames that basically all of the Jews in China had. And so people with those particular last names are often able to trace that they have Jewish roots. And some have actually kind of come back to Judaism. Some have even made Aliyah. But today's Jews in China are largely expats from elsewhere or from the Middle East that have come in more recent immigration waves.
Speak to my friend this week and see if he has any material he could send me or any up to date. Notice the calligraphy is very, very,
Yes.
very interesting. The
Uh-huh.
lameds and it's just very interesting. And it's all pointed. It's got all the vowels on it.
Mm.
It's not easy to read. The Hebrew is not easy, to read. Okay, next one, please. This is the original Reform Haggadah revised, and this is a newer one. And they may have even a newer one. Rabbi Farsi, I don't know if there's a newer one than this. The drawings are very beautiful. Wait a minute. The drawings are very beautiful. It follows the traditional text, unlike the next one.
But it's, so we originally had that because there's a part of it that is backwards compared to the conservative. I can't remember what part where they're saying do with when you wash your hands and when we just ended up giving it up because it was
Right.
just messed up.
Rabbi Foster, I don't know if I included, so you see, that's my congregation in Houston. It's old, it's so old, there's no zip code. So it's pretty old. They use this Haggadah, the Reconstructionist Haggadah at a mainline conservative synagogue because the rabbi at that time, he's been deceased for 50 years, maybe more. He studied at JTS with Mordechai Kaplan, who had great influence on everyone. And this was Mordechai Kaplan's, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism. This was his Haggadah. And there are certain things that Rabbi Kaplan didn't believe in. Now go to the next slide. I don't know if I included it.
So this would be the second night that you would be.
Yeah,
reading
second
it as
night.
a
So
comment.
he called the new Haggadah, edited by Mordechai Kaplan. Ira Eisenstein's his son-in-law for the Jewish Reconstructionist Foundation, printed by Birmingham. Okay, so here it is. Unfortunately, the people are covering it up.
There might be.
Oh, actually, it's not. So the
If someone is there, maybe one of the people that's with you can take the mouse and just move the people out of the way.
How do you-
It's the mouse and we can do it.
Hold on.
Go on a picture. Oh, if you go on the pictures, you can move them around.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
That, just take the upper.
Oh, there you go. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so look at the Hebrew. This is the Kiddush for Passover. Mikra Kodesh, Zecher L'Tzion, remembrance of the going out from Egypt. Then what's the next line in the traditional Kivanu V'charta, which means what? Who has chosen us
Right.
from every, so Mordechai Kaplan did not believe in the chosenness of the Jewish people.
So he brought it.
So his Kiddush was changed to Ki Otanu Kervta Lavota, which means what's the English say on the other side?
Bring in
Means
here with our-
who has quickened us within us the desire to serve thee. So if you go to Reconstruction to synagogue, the Aliyah blessing is different. Asher Bacharbanu is Asher Kereftanu. That's right here. And I have another copy of this, of it. I don't know where I got that one.
Yeah.
They took the traditional Kiddush and pasted it over this one.
Yeah, I'll share. When I lived in New York, I taught at a Reconstructionist synagogue for a couple of years. And the way they did the Torah, the Aliyah blessing, was Asher Bacharbanu im kol ha'amim. They kept Bacharbanu to make so that it had the same sound essentially as where everyone else did, but rather than mikol ha'amim, that we were chosen from all other nations, Bacharbanu im kol ha'amim, we were chosen together with all other nations.
The text that I knew, it was really interesting. Now, just as a side note, because rabbis like side notes. I never met Mordechai Kaplan, but one of his grandchildren is a member of that synagogue. Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan was about 101 back in the early 80s, and I wanted his autograph. I collect autographs, and I gave him. I wanted him to sign my prayer book, or Mordechai Kaplan's prayer book, but he took a 3x5 card and he said to Rabbi Grundfast and signed by him. He died like a year later. One of my most precious possessions that I have. Okay, next, please. Okay, for a secular celebration of Pesach. I didn't open up, I didn't show any pages from this, but you can use your imagination. Humanist Haggadah, not religious. Next one. Okay, this is something I put together, how to enhance your Seder. So I see pouring wine. At our Seder, no one is allowed to pour their own wine. Everyone has to pour for each other. Why? Why do you think? Why do you think you're not allowed to pour your own wine?
Well, then it sort of makes you like a royalty or something that someone else is doing.
Or what else? You're being served. You're free, so someone can
Wow.
serve you. So we serve everybody around the table, and the kids love pouring the wine for everybody. So that's a tradition. I read that someplace in one of my Haggadahs. I have no idea. Filling the kosher Eliyahu, so anybody do the cup of Elijah a different way, or you just pour the wine in?
We've seen people where everyone pours a little.
What we
bit.
do, we pass the cup around. Each person puts a little bit of their wine in, because everyone has the responsibility of bringing the Messianic era, of bringing
Wow,
in,
that's neat.
peace into the world.
That's
So we
neat.
all have a skin in the game, so to speak. Did your father at your Seder shake the table when you opened up the door for Elijah to see that he was drinking the wine? Did anybody do that? My father did. Okay. I try to do it now, but my grandchildren, they yell at me for that. All right, orange on the Seder plate. Anybody know what that new tradition is? Anybody?
Comes out of Oberlin and Susanna.
There was a,
Special.
I think that's the Rabbi Foster got it right. When women started being ordained, the reform in 73 and us in 83, he said, that's as strange, having a woman rabbi is as strange as having an orange on the Seder plate. We have an orange on the Seder plate. I have many friends who are women rabbis. My daughter studied at the seminary for undergraduate. She almost went the cantor route, but she didn't. I'm the only rabbi in my family, the first and last.
At the moment.
At the moment. So we always have an orange on the Seder plate. Of course, we all know about Miriam's cup. Do we know about Miriam's cup? Miriam plays a central part in the story. She was the sister of Moses, and at the end of going over the Red Sea, she and the women start dancing with drums and cymbals, and so it's been a recent custom where we put a special cup, and you can buy them. The Miriam's cup, artists have produced these over the years, and we fill that up with water, because it was, according to our tradition, it was because of Miriam that they had water as they were traveling through the desert. And if you read the Torah closely, when she dies, the next chapter, the people start screaming for water, as if to say everything dried up because of her. 10 plagues, be creative. You know, the Seder is supposed to be a fun time. And every year we try to sort of make something for each of the plagues. Ping pong balls for the hail. My wife every year buys little toy frogs. She bought 120 this year. And we throw them around. One year when we lived in Philadelphia, our very close friends came up from Washington and we assigned them the 10 plagues. Now, our friends are not that religious. I don't know how much they know. They came up with the most creative 10 plagues. It was a highlight of the Seder. So if you invite people to your Seder, you should assign them things. You do the 10 plagues. You do something else, and you'd be surprised what they come up with.
Can I share something quickly?
Please.
All right, I will pin myself so it's easier to see me here. Just a minute.
Go ahead.
All right, I think everyone can see me in person now too. But we had our religious school students last week. They made their own 10 plagues. This is what they made. I got one as well, but it's a case with rice, and inside it are things that represent the 10 plagues. So for instance, we have little boils, we have a little frog, we have different, and they can search it's for kids. So our students, our kindergarten, first, second graders made these for use at their Seder table where they can kind of go in. This is actually rice. There's rice, hard rice that's in it. But inside the rice, they can pull out and try to pull out all the plagues and figure out what they are.
That's wonderful.
That we're doing here with our religious school students. They made this past Shabbat.
If you have guests or whoever's coming, if you ask them to do something like that, it's a great time. Okay, back to the slide, please.
Yeah.
If you're not. So number 6, guess who I am? Word jumbles. That's like you take like Moses' name and mix it all up. And I have that for each person of the table. And pantomime the 10 plagues. That might be kind of difficult. And then creative Seder songs. Do you have any of these? I have a whole bunch of these things. What's it called when you put different words to the melody.
Melody, yeah.
My wife, I'm going to try to convince my wife to come next week because she does the Afikoman Mambo. You've never seen anything like it. My kids and everybody that comes to our Seder wait for that. You should see 125 people at a Seder dancing the Afikoman Mambo. Anyway, you can probably go online and find creative Seder songs. They're all over the place. Okay, next. Uh-oh.
The Guess Who I Am is what is that? That's the one thing
I don't know. I forget what that was.
Okay.
Actually. So I will go through this quickly. This is a reading that I always gave out. And if you look at the left side, it says, Miriam, who first appears in the Torah as the unnamed sister of Moses, led the Israelites in the song and dance as they crossed the Red Sea, as I said. Miriam was a prophetess, took the timbrel in her hand from Exodus, and all the women followed her and danced with timbrels, and Miriam sang. Debbie Friedman, are you familiar with Debbie Friedman's work? She wrote one of the great songs about Miriam. It's fabulous. If I knew how to do music on this, I'll try to do it for next week.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a reading that we do at our Seder for Miriam's cup. Okay, next. We're doing fine. Okay, this is from the Shik Haggadah. I will do that next week. Anybody familiar with the Shik Haggadah?
No.
Shik, it was a artist, a big artist back in the 20s and 30s and 40s. He wrote this Haggadah and did all the artwork, but he did a lot more. He did magazine covers. He did during World War II, a lot of anti-Nazi type of things. And I have a friend who is an expert on Shik, and his Haggadah it's fabulous. And I'm going to show a lot more pages from there for next week. Okay.
That was a favorite bar mitzvah gift or even a wedding present.
Okay, let's do the next one. Okay, so this is more
Oh.
questions. I have to move you around. So this is something that we do sometimes at our Seder. It says, in advance of the Seder, prepare questions your children will have fun answering. So for example, if you were a film director and could hire any actors you wanted, who would you have star as Pharaoh, Moses, the four sons, Elijah, baby Moses, Miriam? People, some people say to just go right through. We're interrupting all the time. Sometimes my wife yells at me because I'm going, too much. But these days, my son-in-law and my son do the Seders. Passover is one of the most important times to invite guests to your home. We are even commanded to open the door and ask, all that were hungry, come and eat. If your children can invite anyone in the world to their Seder, who would they invite? So I'll ask you, anybody want to volunteer? If you can invite anybody you want to your Seder, who would it be?
Do they have to still be alive?
I know who I would invite, but I'll tell you later. Come on, be fun with it.
I would love to have Elie Wiesel.
What?
Elie Wiesel.
Well, he can't come.
Okay, it has to be personal.
Right. I'd invite Tiger Woods. I always wanted to meet him in my Seder. What about you guys? You have to think about that. You see, you have to think about that. Either that or well, if Mickey Mantle was still living, he would be at my Seder. The last one, I can't read it because that's stuff. Oh, wait a minute. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. To involve more folks in the actual recitation of the four questions, ask all who are young or the youngest of their own siblings say questions. Another variation is to have the actual youngest person start them off and then have all the youngest. I've done something different. I did a Seder once when we were in Philadelphia and I knew who was coming and I had different people recite the questions in different languages. That year we had English, Hebrew, French, and I think Italian and Arabic. The local Muslim cleric, the imam, was invited to our Seder. And I think we also had the Catholic priest. He tried to do it in Latin, but it was unsuccessful. Now, you probably have people at your Seder that know different languages. That was really a very fun evening. It was really great. All right, next one, please. Okay, just another addition. I don't know why they did this, but they did it. The San Diego Women's Haggadah. Next. This is really interesting. We know who Edgar Bronfman is. Anybody know who he is?
He's from Canada, right?
Yeah, but it's
And he's
the-
so.
is it Seagram's?
Yeah, he was the head of Seagram's Liquor Company, an incredibly wealthy Jewish person. A couple years ago, he decides he wants to do his own Haggadah.
Huh.
I didn't put any pictures, but it's really sort of chutzpah to make your own Haggadah, I guess. Illustrated by, okay, this one, anybody, the emoji Haggadah. By the way, thank you, Rabbi Foster, for putting it. I figured out how to do it for next week, I think. The emoji Haggadah. So I think I'll do some pages for next week. We know what emojis are. So the front of the cover is what do you think it says?
Sing, shall, sheep,
Anybody figure what those three are?
ram.
What's the middle one?
Looks like a shell.
The shell, right? And what's the last one?
You. Or
Well, it's a ram.
No, a sheep.
That's what it is.
So what do you think it says? And what's the first guy doing? Speaking. And what does the word Haggadah mean? To
It's
tell.
telling.
So it's Haggadah Shel Pesach somehow.
Right. Shel Pesach. In the back of the book, there's like a little legend that helps you understand it. My son and grandson, they can figure it out, but it's really difficult. And the entire text of the Haggadah is with emojis. It's almost impossible to do, but I saw it. I don't know where I saw this. I had to buy it. So it's here for the people here who can see it. All right, next one. The Let My People Go Haggadah. This one from back in the 70s and 80s. That ties itself to all the refusedness coming out. And a lot of us who went to Russia to visit. I went to Russia in '84 and went to Moscow and Leningrad, which today is St. Petersburg. We visited with about 7 or 8 families. This is one of the pages, and it's a very special one for me. Now, so you can see what they did to us, hanging the Jews. And go to the next slide, is the 4 children, 4 sons. And you see the Russia, the evil one, is this guy with a traditional Russian cap on with the star, and he's the evil one lighting his cigar from a menorah.
The way you pronounced Russia, it almost sounded like Russia.
Interesting, Russia, interesting.
Russia.
Did any of you ever go to Russia to see the refuseniks? You did. When did you go?
So we went right before the fall of the Soviet Union, actually, and we were in Moscow and Kiev. And one of the things that was really motivating for me is we met with the Kiev Hebrew teachers who we were smuggling materials to so they could teach Hebrew to each other.
Yes.
And I actually ended up studying Hebrew again after my, so to speak, bad Hebrew school experience. I was kind of motivated. I said, if they could do that in basements, trying to keep an eye out for the KGB, I can do that in freedom. So at the time we had the College of Jewish Studies here, so I did some Hebrew there, and so did Debbie, and the rest, so to speak, is history. We took Hebrew together, and we got together.
That was great. You know, we all the people who eventually got out. I'll tell you a quick story, a side story. We also brought things from, I brought a lot of religious items to fill in mezuzahs, prayer books. I'm surprised when they look through the only thing I had all, you know, when you go through customs, they open up everything. And I had all kinds of Jewish things. The only thing they took out, I had a golf magazine. They didn't know what the heck that was. But we distributed all these things. We brought kosher food with us, salamis. One of the refuseniks, I don't know how they did it. They kept kosher, went to visit him at his home. He had like a 7 or 8 year old and had this salami. But they didn't eat any non-kosher food. And I took the salami out. He knows what salami is. And he said, you can eat this. He refused to eat it. He didn't believe that it was kosher until we cut it up and ate it. And this guy eventually went to Israel.
We brought food and cigarettes, and we had the impression that the Soviets just thought that's the way Western people travel, with food and cigarettes, because all of us had it. They just sort of shrugged their shoulders. Okay. You know, we thought we were going to bribe them with Marlboros. We didn't even have to bribe those Russians, but it did come in handy once in a while to pass around Marlboro cigarettes, which I guess was a favorite of theirs, even though they couldn't get them except from us. So.
We brought a couple of cartons. We use them as tips for the cab drivers and everyone else. I will say that when we were in Moscow, the only time we could visit the refuseniks, because we were with a tourist guide, and she picked us up every day. So a couple of days I was sick, another one was sick. We visited people at night, and I remember taking us to the Lenin's mausoleum. Probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. You go in and you see him there under glass. And it was just remarkable. All right, next slide. I want to get some of these other things. Okay, so I go to the next slide. I took a page of the Russian Haggadah. See, the Rabbinical Assembly, we did this. Rabbi Foster and I, our Rabbinical Assembly did this and paid for it. The next page, next slide, this is the Haggadah. I don't certainly read Cyrillic. And this is the Magid. We can see the Hebrew. UJ Haggadah, of course, why not? The next one. This is from the UJ Haggadah, the first cup of freedom, promise of redemption, birth, and they have readings, and this one is the fourth cup as well. And there's different this is not the whole text. Now this Haggadah, next one, this is one of my favorites. I'm a philatelist, better known as a stamp collector, and I saw this advertised, and I bought it right away. And it has Israeli stamps and other stamps reflecting what goes on in the in the Haggadah. So I have a couple of pages. So here we have Halach Ma'anya, and we have the Lashana Haba, Meretz Yisrael, next year in Israel, because that's what it says there.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, no, go back one. So this is at the top, the Masa, the rabbis
Yeah.
that, and you look at the stamp, what city were they in?
Oh, B'nai Brak,
B'nai Brak, that's a B'nai Brak stamp.
really?
It's a Semel Ha'ir B'nai Brak. That's the B'nai Brak's sign, I guess. That's the
Okay.
stamp.
It is. Yeah.
And here you have, these are not Israeli stamps, but they're stamps of animals, crickets, whatever they were, and the frogs. It's a great, I love that Haggadah. It's just one of my favorite ones. Yep, a baseball Haggadah. A festival of freedom in springtime in 15 innings. The entire text is not there, but that's kind of an interesting one. All right, keep going. Okay, so now I'm gonna do some teaching here. One of my favorite things to do is to look at these illuminated Haggadahs. They are priceless. They're from the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries. And I have 7 of them. I hope I can get through them before the evening because it's absolutely fascinating. This one is the oldest illuminated Haggadah around, called the Bird's Head Haggadah. Why? Look at the figures. Their faces are birds. It was 1300 Southern Germany. The original one is in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And it's the first illustrated Haggadah produced as a separate entity. Up to this point, or during this time, Haggadahs were part of a book with other things in it, prayers, Mishnahs, other kinds of things. They're called miscellanies. And this is one of the first times that they took the Haggadah just on its own. Notice also what's on their heads. See the pointed hat?
Out of the Jews.
In 1215, the Fourth Lateran Council by the Catholic Church said that all Jews had to wear distinctive garb when they walked in the streets. And this is called I have it here, the Judenhut. And you see this a lot in some of isn't it interesting that the artist who did this put the Jews in the hats? It's really interesting. And I know the guy that wrote this, hold on. His name is, what happened? His name is Joel ben Simon, Yoel ben Shimon, who must have done 11 or 12 of these Haggadahs. And we know that it's his because at the very end of the Haggadah, he signs his name and has other notes. This afternoon, Rabbi Foster, I saw a webinar from the library at JTS, and the gentleman who's in charge of these special books gave us an hour lecture on 2 other Haggadahs. They were absolutely fascinating. With that in mind, I urge you to go to the JTS library and go to these Haggadahs, and you can go through each page of the Haggadah. It's fabulous. Okay, next one, please. This is the Erna Michael Haggadah, 1400 Germany, Middle Rhine. It's vellum, animal skin, and the gold leaf. Notice they have the hats again. They're at the Pesach table. Now it's unclear whether it's the guys from B'nai Brak. There's only 4 around the table, and there's servants on either side. They're in deep discussion. What's on the table? Can you make out what's on the table?
Is it a round challah?
That's not a challah, but what do you call it?
Matzah.
Now, most of the matzahs until modern times were round.
Yeah.
By the way, do you know where the first mechanical matzah machine was?
In New York, because Manischewitz?
Nope. In Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Cincinnati. I don't know why, but Cincinnati. What else is on the table? It's hard to see.
Wine.
There's a knife on the left side, and there's some kind of either Kiddush cup or maybe a pitcher. And if you look above them, what's above above the table? It's a lamp.
Mhm.
It's a special lamp that people would use, and they would put oil in it to last throughout Shabbat or the Yom Tov.
Oh,
And now also, as we look at these manuscripts, not only are the hats, but you have to notice the dress. They're probably the dress of the day. So scholars will look at these illuminated manuscripts, and they'll be able to tell and study the garments that the people wore. This Haggadah is in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Right, next. This is the Darmstadt Haggadah, late 1500. This is an Ashkenazi Haggadah. It does not contain any biblical scenes, but this one was by a guy named Yisrael ben Meir of Heidelberg. But he may not have illuminated it. What I've learned is that in some cases, the Jewish person would do the Hebrew, and then a non-Jew or someone else who's an artist might come in and do the illustration. Sometimes it was both, but especially in Italy, that happened. And notice the shin in the middle. This is indicative of some of these. They had a big letter
yeah.
with gold leaf. And this one is anybody recognize this part of the Haggadah?
Yeah.
mean,
I know you would. Which this is after we do the benching. Oh, I don't know.
called Shvach. Oh, the shin is from the Shvach,
That's right. Shvoch hamarcha ala goyim.
but the Chaf is not, doesn't go below the line.
That, well, because they wanted to make it even. Pour out your wrath upon the nations. This was the way the Jews could fight back against the haters of Jews. And they put this here, and you can go look on yourself. Maybe I have it here someplace, but I don't know where it went to. And you can look it up on your Haggadah. These are really terrible verses against, and that's the way we fought back. And notice all the people at the bottom. It's unclear to me. Their heads are covered, not with pointed hats, but again, late 15th century, look at the beautiful colors of the clothing. Those round, now the books are closed. So does that mean that the Seder's over? Or maybe they're getting ready for dinner? Because there's those round things could be matzahs. But I think it's the end of the Seder, because look at all the people around the edges. They're all in deep discussion, men and women, about, I don't know what they're discussing, but the Haggadah says you're supposed to, discuss as much long as you can. So that maybe that's what they're doing. Okay.
All of them have a book.
The what?
All of them have a book.
Everybody has that, right, that's correct. They are books. Now it was.
And they wouldn't have the hats. Also, if they were in the house, they wouldn't have to have the hats.
The other slides we saw, they were inside, they wore the hats. But what's interesting, very, very few people had a Haggadah. There might have been one for the Seder, because they were incredible. They were hand done, and they were incredibly expensive. The scholar we went to today showed us a Haggadah that was half done. It was like a person's head was just penciled in, and he surmised that maybe the benefactor ran out of money. So the scholar said, I'm not going to finish it. Who knows? It was really interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay, next one. Oh, Ashkenazi Haggadah, 15th century, Cologne, Germany. The author is, again, Yoel ben Shimon. He called himself Feibish in Yiddish. Now, the scholar today said this author or this artist is so famous, they just call he's the Yoel, like LeBron or Michael, or he is so famous that he's done 11 or 12 of these. I think this is at the seminary as well. Anyway, you notice that there are men seated. They don't have the hat, but it's just a little smudged up a little bit.
Yeah. Somebody spilled wine on it. I mean,
What?
I said somebody spilled wine on it.
It could be. In fact, he showed us today the bracha for the Kiddush, or maybe it was it was on 2 lines. The second line was all wiped out with wine stains. It was really 500 years ago. It's unbelievable. Okay, next, please. Next one. The Barcelona Haggadah.
Oh,
Barcelona, I visited there a few years ago. Really beautiful. Notice, please, mid-1300s. You see all those strange things around there? They call this grotesques. That's the word that I learned today from the scholar. Look at those unusual animals. There's dragons, and they're all over the place. And this is really an interesting page. Rabbi Foster, can you figure this one out? This is a yaknaz. This tells you how to do Kiddush on the first or second night of the holiday. So look at the top. It says, if you want to do this, b'motzei Shabbat, at the end of Shabbat. So this is how you do Kiddush and motzi and everything on the second night of Passover when it falls on Saturday.
so you do
And
that.
this says Yayin, Kiddush, Ner, meaning, and then Havdalah, and then Zaman, the Shechianu. If anybody has a little luach, a Hebrew luach, that tells you that you buy from the bookstore of how to do things. So this is, I've never seen this in Haggadah. And you see the bottom right, what's the guy, that little kid and the guy, what are they doing?
Oh, is that the Havdalah?
It's hard, what?
It's the candle.
Havdalah, he's holding a candle
Yeah,
for
the
Havdalah.
lamp, the light.
And he's got the Kiddush cup. But I don't know, you wouldn't use Besamim for this. So he has fantastical animals. They're called grotesque, but there's another word, a drollery or drolleries. I looked that up. Decorative images found in the margins of illuminated manuscripts. It was very popular at this time. You find these also in non-Jewish manuscripts of non-Jewish books. It's fantastic. It's just an amazing thing. And remember, this is vellum, so you can see sometimes the page before it bled into it as well, so you can see that. All right, I got two more to go. The next one is the Hamburg miscellany. Miscellany means more than just one thing. So this came from a book that held prayers, haftarot, keynotes, minhagim. It even had a calendar in it. That's the way Haggadahs were back then. And we see this is the splitting of the Red Sea, and see the sea is red. They made the bottom of the sea red. And then at the very top, do you see what the top is? It's kind of hard to see. It's Moses and Aaron before Pharaoh. And you see the architecture that's there. I am not an expert on this by any means, but I love studying this, and it's really wonderful. All right, the final one, and we'll end with this one, is the Rothschild miscellany, bought by the Rothschilds. It was in their home, and it was eventually, I think, given to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. It was written somewhere between 1450 and 1470 in Ferrara, Italy. And this page is from the beginning of the Haggadah. So the guy at the top is doing what? Anybody know?
Searching for.
The Bedikat Chametz. He's searching for Chametz the night before the Seder. He's going around his house, and we
And
do
then
that.
they're making matzahs.
The what?
Special ones.
The
Oh,
rest
and
of them are making matzahs.
Is the flour, and then they're making the matzah. Look at the guy putting the holes in the bread in the
Yeah.
dough.
Mhm.
It's fabulous. So you have the Bedikat Chametz, mixing the dough, rolling it, making the holes, and baking it. Now, this Haggadah was done during the Italian Renaissance. And again, you can look at the clothing. It's a whole study, a whole scholarship of studying the clothing of the Middle Ages. All right, that's what I have for tonight. Are there any questions or comments? So I'll tell you what I have for next week. If I could find my notes there. So for next week, I'd like to show you some of the most special Haggadahs. the Sarajevo Haggadah, and I have a facsimile of that. I have a Braille Haggadah, which I'll show you, and I'll tell you the story about how I got that. I also have one of the greatest Haggadahs I've ever seen, the Moss Haggadah. Are you familiar with the Moss Haggadah? I will bring in, I just purchased yesterday another copy. My wife gave me permission to spend that money, and I'll have it hopefully for next week. But I'll bring my Moss Haggadah in, and I'll tell you the whole story of David Moss, who is unbelievable artist. You can look him up on the internet.
It's MOSS.
What?
MOSS.
MOSS, yes. And I'll bring a bunch of other Haggadahs. I'll take pictures from more of them inside as well. And if you have a special Haggadah, and you'll be with us next time, either come in person or show us in front of your computer. Okay, so thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And hope to see you next time. Happy Passover. Thank you. And thank you, Rabbi.